Imagine that Russia or China sends tens of thousands of troops to Mexico and then does military exercises near the US-Mexico border. They send nuclear bombers, aircraft carriers, submarines that can launch missiles. And they do massive exercises to simulate the collapse of the US regime. They also train special operations forces to decapitate the US leadership. How would the Pentagon respond? How would the US media respond? And what about the doofus that's about to walk into the White House? How would he respond? This might sound like a video game, but what I'm actually talking about, this is precisely what the US military does in South Korea every year, multiple times a year against North Korea. They are exercising and preparing for the collapse of the North Korean regime. The US media paints a picture of North Korea that its leadership is irrational, that its nuclear weapons are a threat to global peace. But what they don't tell us is the other side of the story. What they don't tell us is that during the Korean War, the US bombed the northern half of my homeland, the Korean Peninsula, to obliteration so that there are no buildings left standing. What they don't tell us is that the US repeatedly threatened nuclear war against North Korea during the Korean War. What they don't tell us is that they stationed US troops there under the name of so-called UN Command. What they don't tell us is that the UN General Assembly passed a resolution in the 1970s to dissolve that UN command, but the US ignored it, and they still keep those troops there. There are 28,000 of them there right now. What they don't tell us is that 10 years ago, the US agreed to normalize relations with North Korea, and in exchange, North Korea agreed to stop their nuclear weapons program. But the US has refused to live up to that commitment, and they are preparing for the collapse of the North Korean regime. They are imposing more and more sanctions to choke their economy. But, incredibly, North Korea has not collapsed. And they're actually developing more nuclear weapons. As a peace activist, in principle, I am against nuclear weapons. But if the greatest nuclear power in the world is at your doorstep, threatening to collapse your regime, how else are you supposed to defend yourself? It is the sovereign right of North Korea to launch satellites into space to test their nuclear weapons. Why does the United States, with the greatest nuclear arsenal in the world, have the right to tell other countries who can have and who cannot have nuclear weapons? Unless the US itself disarms, it does not have the right to tell other countries to denuclearize. In March, there will be another massive military exercise that the US conducts in South Korea. And North Korea has already said that it may test launch an ICBM missile in protest of that action. When the US media makes a big fuss about North Korea's nuclear weapons as a threat to global peace, don't believe their lies, because we are smarter than that. The greatest threat to peace is not North Korea and their nuclear weapons, but it's going to be the doofus that's going to sit in the White House and the Pentagon that is committing war crimes around the world. As Korean Americans, we are in solidarity with all of you. We are going to be part of the fight to oppose Trump in the next 4 years. We're going to march for the rights of immigrants and refugees. We're going to march for Black Lives Matter. We're going to march in support of women's rights and LGBT rights. And we hope that you will also stand with us in solidarity when we call for a fundamental resolution to the crisis on the Korean Peninsula, and that includes stopping the war crimes, that includes ending the Korean War, that includes signing a peace treaty, and finally withdrawing US troops from the Korean Peninsula and the rest of Asia. So I hope you will chat with me when I say, end the Korean War, peace treaty now. End the Korean War, peace treaty now. US U.S. troops out of Korea. U.S. troops out of Korea. U.S. troops